Ti lasciavo fare sempre meno a dire il vero, ma comunque era per toglierti di torno. Sviluppavi intere teorie sul coinvolgimento in amore, ascrivevi il mio dolore alla mia troppo poca devozione. Non capivi che mi stavi dando sempre più sui nervi, che non ti potevo più ascoltare, guardare, odorare, accogliere. Con la testa ero già completamente altrove. Cominciai a pensare che ti avrei lasciato. Se all'inizio mi piaceva stare abbracciato a te, contorcermi nel letto, godere quando venivo o quando venivi, col tempo stetti sempre più alla larga. Cercavo di arrivare tardi, non ti incoraggiavo più, non prendevo l'iniziativa, non ingoiavo il tuo membro, non stavo disteso sotto di te. Non hai mai saputo come prendermi. Good evening, Mr. Brane Mozetič. How do you pronounce your name exactly?
Brane Mozetič.
Ah, Brane Mozetič. Okay, thank you very much indeed for taking this video call. And this was a dream, my dream, to talk to you directly. We did it eventually, and I have gone after you since a long time. Anyway, I'll start to ask you some questions about your career, about you as author, as writer, okay? But you are not only a writer, a poet, an editor, a translator. You have the literature in the blood. What did you study, and where does this writing need come from?
So I studied comparative literature, but I started to write when I had maybe 13 years, 14 years. I think that my writing was already in the beginning a way to express my difference, especially because later or now when I look my first writings, I already see that already in my first writings I was describing my problems with my sexual orientation. So already in this writing, when I had 13 and 14 years old, I was writing about how I am in love with a schoolboy, a boy in the same class. So I think that I used writing and also all my literature till today, it's literature about my feelings and also about my sexual orientation. So that is also the reason that in my literature it's very difficult to find anything which is not connected with these topics.
So it started like writing like medicine, more or less, in order to...
Maybe, yes.
More or less.
Like a therapy. Or not like a therapy, but also to say to someone else, to express yourself to someone else. So it was easier that I write in a literature, in a poem or in a short story, that to say to someone, you know, I have feelings for the same sex, and so on and so on. And also, I was too young to know exactly what I feel. You understand?
Yes.
So, in a way, I didn't know exactly that I'm, of course, maybe till 18 or 20 years, I didn't feel, I didn't say to myself, oh, I'm gay, I'm homosexual, not at all. I was just in love with boys. This was different, so it was not in my head. It was only in my heart.
So your first story was about your first relationships, maybe, or it was
not relationship,
just
my sympathy.
Your sympathy. Okay. Okay, perfect. Of course, the difference between you and all the people writing such reflections or using literature as therapy is that this is a good writing, of course. You are used to write burning words in the real sense of this word. In the Italian edition, the title of the book is Parole che bruciano, burning words. This is exactly what they are, always, in all your piece of writings, I think.
That's also because, everyone who is gay or discovered that he's gay very young, he has all the time problems not only with people around himself, but also with himself in his inside. So this is all gay people. We are a little bit also obsessed with our sexual orientation because it's so different from majority. So we have all the time thinking about our problems with the ladies or with our parents or with partners, because also if we have a partner, we have also problems because of a kind of discrimination in society. So that's also the reason that all my work is very connected with real life and real emotion, but it's not the same. This is literature. This is not real life.
Yes, correct. And this is very, very good. I discovered your books in a gloomy period of my life. I was finishing my first relationship with my first boyfriend. And as I told you a few days ago, I got a grip in your books, mainly in Possession. Let's show the cover of the book. And also in Burning Words, in Parole che bruciano. So, how much your passion for writing comes from a kind of loneliness feeling, not only because of this feeling. How can I tell this? Because you are understanding your sexual orientation, but were you really alone in writing your books, or how much they are connected, loneliness and the passion? I don't know if it's clear. My question is clear.
So, in a way, so one of my books they have different titles, and they are all like passion, possession, obsession. So, and also my relationships are all very wild, in a way, wild and obsessed. And when I write in one, how can I say it? So, in a kind of it's really a passion to write. So when I write the poem, and later I don't think about the poem. I don't correct a lot. And also in the same is with the short stories. And when I wrote a novel, for example, I almost closed myself in my world for 1 or 2 months, and I was writing all the time. So It's like something coming from inside to the paper, and later I don't correct a lot, so I don't make a lot of correction. There is not my writing. It's not so. Also my prose. It's not a real prose. It's very autobiographical. It's very poetical prose, and there is not a kind of structure, classical structure.
Yeah, so
of a novel of something like this. It's like a long poem in a way.
Yeah, there is much more instinct in your writing. So
it also, yes.
Yes, yes, and it is. This is just what we can read in your pages. So when you told that you closed yourself in a room in order to write your novel. So were you? Can I ask you if you were engaged in that period? And how did you connect your private life, if you had a boyfriend, I don't know, your private life with your boyfriend and with the literature?
So I don't have a job. This is very important. So I'm a freelancer and I work more or less at home. But I work very different. I do very different things. So I organize readings. I publish books. So I must do lectures. I have kind of contact with printing house, and a lot of, so maybe 20 years I was also very active, like a gay activist and AIDS activist. So I did a lot of projects which was very militant also. So for writing, I don't have a lot of time for writing. I never had a lot of time for writing. So that's also the reason that maybe I wrote poems, and I wrote a lot of things when I was not at home. So when I went to a writer's residence abroad, for example, for 1 month, I was writing all the time, 1 month, but not at home. So I had problems to write at home, because it's problem with this that you have duties every day, you have other activities, you have very banal things and so on. So it's difficult for me. I'm not like a classical novelist that I wake up at 5 in the morning and write, I don't know, 1 or 2 chapters till 8 o'clock in the morning or something like this. Completely not at all. So a lot of things I wrote outside, but for example, a novel which was also, it is also in Italian, Storia Perduta, Storia Perduta,
okay.
Which is a novel about rave generation or techno generation, about parties, about drugs and so on. This novel I wrote all at home, but I was really more or less close to my room, and I was listening all the time with this on my ears, and I was listening all the time techno music, and I was typing the novel. I was really inside this novel, and when I'm inside, so I don't have problems with other words.
So we discovered one more detail about you, the techno music. This is very useful in writing process.
You know, one reason is that I was activist and I was organizer. I was so obliged to organize also so dance evenings in the club, which was part of the organization, because here we don't have like private gay clubs and so on. The only thing is part of our organization. So I was there once a week, all night. So I was also obliged to consume that music, and I became part of this music and of people and of these parties. So the result was this novel. So anyway, there was one result, not only party.
And then during these last years, you wrote also books for children.
Yes.
Yeah. And how is it possible to reconcile such different literary genres in français?
So the one reason was that as a publisher, I started also to publish picture books for children of other authors. And then I was thinking that there are also some subject that no one is writing about. So when I was searching my old papers, I found out that I wrote a strange story for children when I had 22. It was in the period of pacifist movement, and it was anti-war story. And I found out that it's very interesting, this story, so I just make some corrections, and after all these years I published, so somebody illustrated the books, and I published my first children book. It was anti-war story. And then I began to think about other subjects which are not covered maybe. So the second one was about handicapped child, which was my niece, in fact, because I was very connected with her. And the third one was of course, I wanted to write something like a gay story for children. Because this doesn't exist in Slovenia, not at all. And also in other countries there are not such stories. There are stories about two fathers and two mothers and families and so on. But I wrote a short story. I hope it will be published next year in Italian. It is also already translated. It's titled Primo Amore, and it's a story about two boys in the kindergarten who became very friends, or they are in love. We don't know exactly. So it's a very nice story. It was also translated into other languages, but here when it was like the first Slovenian children books with a gay subject. And then I wrote another one which was about migrants, because we had a lot of problems with migrants, like in Italy. And now I finished the fifth one, which is once again there are only animals, small animals, but it's once again a story about friendship, love, and also about separation, and a little bit about death and memories.
And was it difficult to adapt your style? Because in these books for children, the style is very soft and calm, and isn't it? So it's totally different from your previous books. Was it hard to get this style, or?
No, because I have a lot of poems which are very soft. Mm-hmm. I have a whole book of sonnets, a kind of sonnets, modern sonnets, which are very soft. There are poems about love and also about death and separation, and they're all very, very soft. So I have a lot of, I don't have only hard literature, but yes, I have also very, very soft literature. And in this writing for children, I have very fine and very melodic and soft language.
Yes, also in Parole che bruciano, there are a lot of very soft and very romantic scenes and images about the night, the moon, sleeping together. So that's true. Okay.
I think that I have sometimes problems not to be too sentimental. So I'm on the march of sentimentality and not sentimentality, and sometimes it's really difficult.
Yes. Can I read just 2 lines of your Parole che bruciano? Just
Yes.
to give the idea to the readers. Ascolto il linguaggio del tuo sonno, i lievi gemiti e i lupi che ululano tristemente sui colli, la luna piena. La luna piena ti eccita, le notti sono umide. Quando ti amo di più, piangi, il perché lo so e non lo so. Ti colmo di premure, anch'io sento che è vano ogni sforzo, sento che qualcosa è sparito dal mondo, sento che la tua testa è vuota. Le tigri percorrono l'est e la savana, solo l'acqua ormai, l'acqua è la loro meta. It's very, 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 very nice. Very good. You are also a translator. So I was wondering how much difficult was to you to find a good translator for your books. I mean, your relationship with your translators in Italy, for example, or in other countries.
So, Slovenia is very small and the language is very small, and a lot of translators from Slovenian into other language are Slovenians. So they live in Slovenia. And they know so good the other language, or they are bilingual. So normally there is a lot of languages that I can understand a little bit. So for the translations, especially translations into English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, I always check the translations. So when the translator made the translation, I checked his or her work. Because sometimes the translators also they understand differently that you wanted to say, and sometimes they forget one line, for example, or something like this. Very strange technical mistakes, maybe. Not that they want to change, but there are also languages that I can't do anything.
And I'm referring now especially to a book for children. The title is Come verde il mondo senza le bombe della guerra. I don't know if this was one of your first books for children, but I was interested. I suppose this is in your anti-war and pacifist period. Okay, so I'm wondering how was born this book?
So this was the book that I was talking before.
Yes.
So I wrote the story when I had 22 years.
22 years, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I completely forgot on this story.
Mm-hmm.
This was not published. So when I was looking my old papers 10 years ago or something like this, I found this story.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that maybe it's once again it's interesting to say, because we live in a world with a lot of wars all around, with a lot of violence, and so I took this story and I published it. This is the first story for children.
The first at all. Okay. So about your previous works like Passion and Burning Words, Parole che bruciano, eccetera, eccetera. How was difficult to publish in Slovenia such books, or how much difficulties to publish anything about homosexuality or in Slovenia?
So I started to be a gay activist in the end of the 80s, and because I was always my field of interest was always culture. So I organized, I prepared, I was activist mostly on the culture field. So I prepared exhibitions, I started to work with the LGBT Film Festival, and I founded, so I was the first editor in the organization, in the gay organization. I founded the LGBT book series, so edition, which is Lambda, and I'm an editor of this edition from now already 7 years, and in this edition I published around 130 books on LGBT themes or subject. So most of the books that I wrote after this, I published in this my publishing house. So because for me this is the more simple. So my life is really concentrated on LGBT thematic. Everything that I translated, all books are with LGBT subject, and also my circle of people that I communicate are more or less LGBT. So I'm very close to these activities. Also, of course, I cooperate with other people, especially, with translators, and I publish also books of other peoples and so on. But my main field it's LGBT. So, and I also give possibility to other writers to write and to publish. Of course, I publish their books. So this is also the reason that now I can say that in Slovenia it's not difficult to publish a book about LGBT theme or subject, because I published them.
Perfect. That's the perfect solution, the best solution.
But with other publishers, so the other publishing houses, they don't publish a lot of books with this subject, not at all. Maybe 2 in a year or 1 in a year.
You mentioned also the Gay Film Festival in Slovenia.
Yes.
Did you ever attend the film festival? It's named Mix Film Festival in Milan?
No.
Never?
No, I never.
You should.
Yeah, I know, but I was never. We never had. Our festival has a very small budget, and we don't have money to go to the other festivals to look the films. So now it's very simple, because they send you films by internet and so on, or links, and you can see everywhere. Every year I watch a little bit more than 100 films for selection of our festival.
Okay, last question for you. What's your favorite author? Not French. Not French, possibly, because I know you are a translator from French. So.
So,
if it's possible, or what's the characteristic that I don't know, you like most than the others when you read a book?
So I will say, so I translated a lot of French writers, and I translated only writers that I liked. This is a privilege.
Yeah.
And also all these writers influenced me. But there are also some writers that I didn't translate and they influenced me. For example, I like very much Garcia Lorca from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And for my prose, was very important American writer Dennis Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis Cooper, really important because his prose really influenced my prose. There are also similarities. About others, I don't know. I liked very much Argentinian poet Alejandra Pizarnik, for example.
I don't know.
She's dead already. She was a lesbian, one of the biggest lesbian poets of the 20th century. From Italian literature, I liked very much that I published also Pasolini, Amado Mio, and the other short story, which is also in the same book. So the story is from his childhood.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This I liked very much. Sandro Pena, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I think
I don't know more
that's
now.
enough. That's enough. Okay. So, Brane, thank you very much indeed for your availability. I hope to hear from you soon again, or maybe if you will be in Italy, maybe for next Pride in May, or maybe for the film festival, just call me, let me know, and so we will have a beer together.
Okay. I really hope that this story for children, Primo Amore, will be published next year. And we prepared a group here of the puppet theater, prepared also the puppet play based on this book. So it's very nice.
Yes, I hope to read it soon. And is the artist always the same? I can't remember the name of the
Yes.
the woman making the
Maya
drawings.
Castillas.
Ah, okay.
She's the same designer as Anti-War Story.
Yes, drawings are very, very nice. Very, very nice. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All the best to you. Thank you.
All the best to you. Bye.